afternoon. My name's David Burke, and I'm starting a podcast. There are millions of them out there. What's mine about? Mine's about Franklin D Roosevelt in Warm Springs. He came here hunting for a cure for polio. He was out of politics. He wound up creating the world's first treatment for polio patients, buying 5,000 acres of farmland, getting elected governor of New York twice, becoming president of the United States 4 times. A lot of occurrences happened here because Roosevelt came to Warm Springs, Georgia. So let's delve into it. I'm going to try to do these podcasts weekly. Today's Saturday. I'll try to have another one up by next Saturday. And it's going to be a long process. And my learning skills are going to get better because I've never done a podcast. I want to learn how to put pictures in pictures and do all these other things great podcasters do. What's my background? I was a park ranger at Roosevelt's Little White House for about 25 years. And I met people there like Suzanne Pike, who was one of the first non-polio patients at the Roosevelt Foundation, or the Roosevelt Warm Springs Foundation. And she had Thanksgiving dinner with him. And when I first started working at the Little White House, she told me something profound, that she was 3 years old or 4 years old. And at the Thanksgiving dinner, he went and stood up on the edge of the wall there and told all the children, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to shake each and every one of your hands as you walk out the door. And she said it was unique because he, of course, was paralyzed. He had leg braces on, and just to stand up was a huge effort. And I didn't think much about it. And then when I started learning about Roosevelt so I could do my job as an interpretive park ranger, I started reading documents about how he did that at Thanksgiving. And everything she told me was backed up. And I'm sitting here going, who am I working beside here? What treasure? Suzanne Pike. She since passed us, but she left a legacy, a treasure of information. But she gave to me a spark that I took and ran with and discovered things about Roosevelt she really didn't even know, because I just went a step further. And we're going to talk about a lot of these things. One thing led to another, which led to another. In my research, I started compiling notes, stories, meeting people that in 1999 and the year 2000 also, there were still many people coming to the Little White House that remembered Roosevelt, or some that even knew him. And I did not know what all occurred down here in the middle of a western central Georgia valley where some warm water coming out of the ground at 88 degrees changed the world. So much so that me and my brother, we wrote a book. It's Warm Springs, The Images of America. Tried to write the book about FDR, but they didn't do picture books on people. So I said, okay, well, let's do it about the water. And there's about, I don't know how many chapters there are, but look at some of the people I knew that worked with Roosevelt. There's his John Schrader. That was his undertaker down here that night at Patterson's funeral home. Paul Harless, he wrote memoirs. He was on the USS Potomac. There were Wimbley Cannon, worked at the foundation. Marion Dunn, a great friend of mine who passed away recently, was the Frogmen. He's on Team 6, Frogmen, or Team 3. I have to go back and look it up. He didn't know what frogmen would come. Today, there are SEALs. But he met Roosevelt as a push boy at the foundation. And here's a quick little story. Marion was pushing a patient around. He was from Pine Mountain Valley. Marion was pushing a patient around, and the little patient was kind of whimpering. And the president asked the little boy, son, what are you crying for? He said, my push man's going to join the Army. He got drafted. Now, this was November of 41. This is about a week before Pearl Harbor, and Roosevelt was down here for a day. Anyhow, Roosevelt told the child, he says, look, we'll get you another push, boy. Don't worry about it. He says, yeah, but mine gives me peanuts and Coca-Cola. And Marion told me, he said, he pointed his finger at me and said, son, join the Navy and see the world. So Marion says, I went to Atlanta the next day on a bus. Now, he'd already been drafted by the Army, and he went up to Atlanta to the depot where they were drafting and applied for the Navy. And the recruiter said, we're full, no need to try. And Marion says, no problem, I'm already drafted, I'm in the Army. So they said, where are you from? And Marion told him, I'm from Warm Springs. And he said, a Marine stepped up at that point and says, where? I said, Warm Springs, that's the President's Foundation. I said, yeah. What do you do there? I'm a push boy. I think 5 minutes later, he was in the United States Navy. And Marion then went to, I believe, Florida, Key West, and Miami, and places like that, where they put him on an underwater demolitions team. Team 3, I believe he told me it was, Team 3. And then he went up to Maryland to the proving grounds where he learned how to place bombs on stuff, and he got yelled at because 2 guys were from Georgia. And the drill sergeant was telling him to put it on the brim, and they weren't doing nothing. Marion sat there not knowing what to do. Put your bombs on the brim. Cuss word, cuss word. Put them on it now. What's a brim? Because Marion fished down here in Georgia, and brim are what we catch and fry in the pan. He'd never heard of a brim of a hill, but that was the term used. And then Marion was in the water 3 days before D-Day. He was there D-3. And he was not in charge, but he was one of a few teams. They got charged with blowing up mines out there, disassembling mines. And he said a few of the guys were getting blown up because they didn't know they were magnetic. And their masters, I forgot what he called them, beach masters that were supposed to shine a light and tell them where to go, had gotten blown off course, so they weren't able to find them. So they're out there in the rubber boats, and some shelling was occurring every now and then. And he said, Jacques Cousteau gave us these rubberized suits, and that helped us out because of the magnetic properties of the mines. But Marion was out there, and, well, he got, I guess, best way to put it, blown up, probably in 88. And this was during D-Day or after D-Day, shortly after. I'm not sure exactly when, because Marion had to also clean up. There were a lot of people in the water for days, and people had to go find those guys and bring them home. Marion was one of them. He would not talk about it, and I never asked him about it. One man did, and it sent Marion literally into a PTSD trauma. We didn't see Marion for 2 or 3 years. But when he came back, he was just as happy as ever, bringing us fresh killed ham biscuits, sausage biscuits. When gas went up to $5 a gallon, he had a gas can in his truck. I said, Marion, why are you carrying that gas can around? He says, in case somebody needs some gas. That's the kind of man he was. Anyhow, he went back into the Navy, and at Okinawa, he was on the ship. I think it was either the Oberrinder, and it got kamikaze. Marion was like a half a mile away. He said everybody topside was just killed. They were doing underwater demolitions to salvaging some boats, and he said everybody up there was just killed, and he ended up in the hospital. But after back to the D-Day, after he got blown up, he woke up in a hospital. Because I asked Marion one time, I said, Marion, just because you worked at Warm Springs, did anything ever happen to you that, you might have been protected or Roosevelt recognized? He said, I don't know. He said, when I woke up in the hospital after being blown up out there in the ocean, he said, this doctor came in with handlebar mustache. I couldn't understand a word he's saying, so all I did was name, rank, and serial number. I thought he was the Kaiser. I'd seen pictures of the Kaiser before, and that was, of course, Kaiser Wilhelm. And Marion's from Pine Mountain Valley, Georgia, and who knows what education he had. But the doctor said, "Son, what's your name?" But he didn't understand that. And finally, a janitor or something walked in one day and said, "Hey, boy." And Marion perked up because that's a Southern thing. Marion said, "What? Why ain't you talking to these people?" He says, "I can't understand what they're saying." "Where am I at?" He says, "You're in Boston. That's the doctor." And he named the doctor's name, and I can't think of it right now, but if I will, I'll come back to it because I wasn't expecting to talk about this on my first podcast. But this doctor was one of 3 doctors that trained down here in Warm Springs, and one doctor stayed. I believe it was God, I'll come back to that too. I promise you. Because, you had the head Dr. Hoke who trained Dr. Irwin under him, and the other doctor that went to Boston, and Dr. Irwin stayed here. When you hadn't talked about this story in nearly 5 years, that's when I retired, you kind of forget some things, but it will come back to me. Anyhow, Marion said within about 5 minutes he had a steak and ice cream and was eating away. He went back to the service again, and where the kamikaze ship hit in 1945 at Okinawa, got blown up there again, wound up in the hospital, woke days later, he said. And after he recovered, he came back to Warm Springs. He had enough of war, came back to Warm Springs, became a brace maker, and serviced braces and made braces. They fabricated braces for all the polios. Every brace was different because every person's body and shape is different. And Marion was a brace maker, and a good one from what I hear, because he had his heart into it. Marion was a man that put his heart into his work, and he could look at braces. I've seen people walk into the little White House one time. Marion's eyeing him. "You've been down there at Houston Clinic?" The man said, "Yeah, how you know?" "I helped Jack Houston work on that brace you're wearing right there. We designed that." These stories go on and on. I seen a senator come here one time. Who was this? Back when they were talking about using the springs for PTSD patients. And is actually a House of Representative, head of the, I believe, Armed Forces Committee. And he had polio when he was a kid. He came to the foundation, and Marion made his braces for him. His hand splints. He had to have certain hand splints, and nobody in the country could fix them except people at Warm Springs. They had rubber bands and pulleys. And he is widely known at Fort Leonard Wood. They have buildings named after him out there in Missouri. He was the House of Representatives rep from there. And, of course, back in 2010, I think, is when they voted him out during a Republican wave or Democrat wave, whatever. But they voted the congressman out. But Marion told him, he says, "I never got my Purple Heart." The next day, there was a helicopter flying into Warm Springs, picked Marion up, took him down to Fort Benning. He got his Purple Heart, came back home, and showed us. And it was just an incredible time. Hell, let's see here. My computer screen went off for a second. I guess I need to set this up. Again, this is the first time I've podcasted. There'll be a couple mistakes. There's going to be a couple hiccups here and there. But I'm going to learn all this, and we'll talk about some cool things that I think is cool. So one little thing like that, Marion Dunn's story still has an impact in my life. And let's see what he wrote in the book here, because I had people that knew FDR specifically sign their name. Marion Dunn, push boy, brace maker, 1938 to 1989. Carolyn Hendricks, another one of the little interpretive park rangers. She recently died. She received candy from the president. She got on the bumper of his 1938 Ford, and he gave her some candy. A lot of stories like this occurred, but back in 1924, and we'll close this down for the first installment, and we'll come back more and revisit some of this, but it was in 1924 that Roosevelt first heard about Warm Springs. How did he hear about Warm Springs? A man named Tom Loyalist and George Foster Peabody, who were the working managers of the property here at that time, went to the Democratic National Convention and told Roosevelt who was going to nominate John Davis as the Democratic candidate. And I read the New York Times accounts. There's Roosevelt on stage, a pathetic, tragic figure, once a highly popular politician. So they counted him out because of polio. So when Roosevelt heard about Warm Springs, a little place in western central Georgia, because he had tried everything he could think of for a cure for polio, from monkey oil to electric shock, pick a therapy. He tried it. This is kind of one of his last chances. He's, 42, 43 years old by this time. So he comes to Warm Springs, Georgia on October 3rd, 1924. And that's the day the world changed. The man that carried him off the train did not realize that the man he carried off the train will be our future president, 4-time elected president of the United States. And here's a quick rundown. Let's see. He became elected governor of New York twice, 4 years to the day of him coming to Warm Springs, pretty much. October 2nd, 1928, he was nominated by acclamation. Anyhow, he oversaw us through the Great Depression with the New Deal. Arguably good or bad, however you want to do it, but he created it. He oversaw us through the Dust Bowl. He ended Dust Bowls forever with programs like the CCC, where they planted millions of trees. Roosevelt's Tree Army. They made windbreaks. The Soil Conservation Service. We don't have Dust Bowls today because of Franklin D Roosevelt, because of Warm Springs. He created the March of Dimes. We don't have polio today because the dimes everybody collected went into the vaccine. And if you put a dime in the little bitty envelope back in first grade and stood in line like we did, it's because Roosevelt found. That's why his picture's on the dime. 1 year after he died, they put his picture on the dime on his birthday, January 30th, in 1945. 46. That's the first Roosevelt dime. And it's got significant meaning to it because that little bitty coin means you don't have polio. And that's a neat story for homeschooling, for education. It's a worldwide story. He was commander-in-chief of our armies that led us through a world war. Well, his generals won the war. Yes, they did. Who appointed them? He oversaw the development of atomic energy because he made a field trip to Alabama, went to Muscle Shoals before he was president because he was interested in electricity here and everywhere, because he paid 4 times as much for electricity at his Hyde Park mansion than he paid here at his home in Warm Springs, the little cottage over there. Not yet the little White House. This is back in 1924. He had to pay his power bill. So he was interested in electricity. He wanted to dam up a little creek down below the Meriwether Inn and turn it into a dam to provide hydroelectric power to the inn and the, I think, 27 cottages that were on the property that he wound up buying. But he went to Muscle Shoals, inspected the dam. Why? There was affordable power, there were jobs around the dam, and there was flood control. Tennessee River flooded. He came back to the little White House as president-elect in 1933 for his birthday party, January 30th, 1933. Oh, that's the same day Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. And then Roosevelt outlined in the little White House what would become the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, what would be part of his first 100 days program of New Deal programs and radically changing government. But look what TVA did. Aluminum, electric power, flood control, and ultimately uranium. The aluminum produced at plants like Alcoa and Reynolds, those in World War II would be used to produce B-17s to fly over Nazi Germany. The fertilizers produced at all the fertilizer plants for farmers up and down the Tennessee River now, because of electricity, will be used to make bombs to drop on top of the imperialists and the fascists. The electricity at Tellico Plains up in Tennessee is going to be used to create the uranium for the first atomic bomb. In fact, yesterday marks the 80th anniversary of the Nagasaki bomb. All because he made a field trip to Muscle Shoals because his power bill was 4 times higher than that of his power bill in New York. Those are the kind of stories that I want to talk about in our future podcasts, and I hope you'll join me. And I'll get this one up, and we'll start learning how to do this, and we'll have some good talks. Hopefully we can do a few live ones, and I would like to have a few guests on here too, because I know quite a few people that are a lot smarter than I, or had different experiences than I, and know things about Roosevelt more than I that I yield to. So let's have fun with this. The title of this program is A Warm Springs Memoir. It's a step back in time, and thank you for watching.